Well, today we are finishing our series on neglected books, and today we've come to the Song of Songs, and actually originally we were going to look at 7 neglected books, and the reason we're doing this series is we believe there are books in the Bible that are often neglected. Christians don't read them that much, and pastors hardly ever preach from them, so it's just on my heart to look at these neglected books of the Bible, make you aware of them, and maybe you'll go back and read them and study them. But originally I had 7, but because of the snowstorm, I had to decide on one to leave out, and I had to leave out poor old Obadiah. Man, I felt so sorry for him. I've apologized to him over and over again. I told a guy in the church about that. He said, well, just do another series in the future and entitle it Really Neglected Books. So if I do that series, I'll be sure and cover Obadiah. Well, I didn't want to neglect Song of Songs. And before we get into this book today, I just want to share a humorous story that I came across. There was a couple from Minnesota that were experiencing a very cold, bitter, and depressing winter, kind of like what we've experienced lately here in Ohio. So that couple decided to go down to Florida to enjoy some warm weather. They said to each other, why don't we just go down and stay in that same hotel where we honeymooned 20 years ago? So they made the arrangements. The only hiccup was they couldn't get on the same flight. So they agreed that the husband would travel down to Florida on Thursday, and then the next day on Friday, his wife would follow. Well, on Thursday, the husband arrived safely. He went to the hotel and he checked in. He decided to email his wife and let her know that he had arrived safely. But he inadvertently made a small yet significant mistake. He left out a letter in her email address. So his email actually went to another woman. Well, that other woman, the recipient of his email, was a woman in Houston, Texas, who earlier that morning had buried her husband. Her husband had been a minister. In the evening, she decided to check her emails because she was expecting that maybe some friends and family who could not attend the funeral service might be sending her some words of condolence. Needless to say, when she opened up the email, she was shocked and she fainted. Her son ran into the room to discover her, and thankfully she was okay. But he looked at the computer screen, and this was the email that he found. To my loving wife, I have arrived. I know you're surprised to hear from me. They have computers here now, so I decided to send you an email. I've arrived, and I've been checked in. I just want you to know that everything has been prepared for your arrival tomorrow. I'm looking forward to seeing you then. I hope your journey is as uneventful as mine. P.S. It sure is hot down here. Well, it might get hot in here today because I'm going to be preaching on the Song of Songs, and it's pretty graphic and pretty detailed, but I think it's a book in the Bible for a reason. It's a neglected book, yes, but it is in the canon for a reason, and it's a neglected book. Now, I want to tell you, it's not always been neglected. In the Middle Ages, it was not neglected. There was a man by the name of Bernard of Clairvaux, a famous preacher in the 12th century, and he preached 86 sermons on the Song of Solomon, just the first 3 chapters. Can you believe that? 86 sermons on the first 3 chapters of the Song of Songs. And so for him, it certainly wasn't a neglected book, but in our day, so often it is a neglected book. And you say, well, why is it? Why is it that so many pastors don't preach from it? Why is it that so many Christians don't read it? Well, I think one of the reasons is it's very graphic. It's a very graphic portrayal of romantic love, and it even utilizes erotic language and erotic images. And probably a lot of pastors just don't feel comfortable reading from this book to a mixed audience. Plus, like the book of Esther, there's no mention of God in the book. You will never see the name God mentioned in this book. At least in the book of Esther, it talks about fasting. But in Song of Songs, there's no mention of God. There's nothing blatantly religious mentioned in the Song of Songs, and it's never quoted in the New Testament. So again, you might say, well, why is it even in the Bible? Well, hopefully we'll see that as we go through this message. But let me share a quote with you. I found this quote very helpful as I was studying and preparing for this message. This quote comes from a Bible scholar by the name of Tom Gledhill. And he writes, "It has been suggested that just as Job explores the riddle of suffering and Ecclesiastes the riddle of existence, so the Song of Songs explores the riddle of love." And that's what we're going to be talking today about. We're going to be talking about the riddle of love. So let's go ahead and jump in. Turn over to Song of Songs, chapter 1. I'm going to start by just reading the first 4 verses. We'll read other passages this morning, but let's begin with Song of Songs, chapter 1, beginning with verse 1. It says, "The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Your anointing oils are fragrant. Your name is oil poured out, therefore virgins love you. Draw me after you, let us run. The king has brought me into his chambers. We will exult and rejoice in you. We will extol your love more than wine. Rightly do they love you." Now let me just say this up front. I'm not going to be able to go verse by verse. I'm not going to be able to give you a full exegetical presentation of this book in one message, but I hope to give an overview. I hope to give a summary so that you can go back and read this book for yourself. You can know what you're doing when you go back and read this book and maybe get you a good commentary, and with that you'll be able to understand what God is saying to you in the Song of Songs. So let's just go through today. I want to give you a summary. I want to point out some things about this book, and I want to start with the title. There are different titles given to this book. One is that I've already mentioned, and the one that I use is the Song of Songs. And that's found in verse 1. It's called the Song of Songs, which means it's the greatest song. Think about the phrase, the Holy of Holies. What would that mean? The most holy place. The King of Kings. That would mean the greatest king. So the Song of Songs is saying it's the greatest song, and in particular, the greatest love song. Sometimes it's called the Song of Solomon. Again, in verse 1, it says, which is Solomon's, which could mean it was written by Solomon. Doesn't necessarily mean that because the Hebrew is kind of ambiguous. It could mean it was written by Solomon. It could mean it was dedicated to Solomon. And it could mean it was written about Solomon. I take it was written by Solomon, but that's not necessarily the case. And then sometimes it's called canticles. If you're not familiar with that term, a canticle is a hymn or religious song. So if you ever come across the phrase canticles or canticle of canticles, they're talking about the Song of Songs. And for instance, if you look over at 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 32, one of the reasons, not only because of verse 1, but because of this verse, people think that Solomon actually wrote it. In 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 32, it says, Solomon spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. So we know he wrote a lot of proverbs. We know he wrote a lot of songs, and so he very well could have written what we call the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon. Now let me talk about the characters. So this is kind of like a play in the way. You have different characters. You have Solomon. He's mentioned 7 times in this book. You also have the woman that's called the Shulamite in chapter 6, verse 13. And the word Shulamite may mean Solomon's bride. The word Shulamite comes from the Hebrew word Solomon. So Shulamite simply means Solomon's bride. And then you also have the daughters of Jerusalem. They too are mentioned 7 times. And they're probably royal servants who attended to the bride of Solomon. Now, one thing I'll say to you, when you read the Song of Songs, it's best to read it in a more modern translation. And the only reason is if you read it, for instance, in the King James, and if you want to read it in the King James, that's fine, but it doesn't identify who the speakers are. So when you go through the Song of Songs, sometimes in the play, so to speak, Solomon is speaking. Sometimes the woman, the Shulamite, is speaking. Sometimes the daughters of Jerusalem are speaking. And if you read a Bible translation, it just all reads together, you're not going to know who's speaking. But in a more modern translation, in subheadings, it will say, this is Solomon speaking. This is the woman speaking. These are the daughters of Jerusalem speaking. And it'll help you as you try to understand the Song of Songs. Now, there is a debate. Is this a unified story from beginning to end? So starting with verse 1 of chapter 1, is this a play like a story that's telling a unified story of love? Or is this basically different love songs and different love poems all compiled together? And I'll tell you, at times it does seem like that, so we can't know for certain. Well, let me tell you about the interpretation. There are a lot of people that see this as an allegory. A lot of people view this as an allegory of God and his love for Israel, or Christ and his love for the church. And that's probably why Bernard of Clairvaux, he spoke and shared 86 sermons on the first 3 chapters. I guarantee you that he viewed this book as an allegory. And I think one of the reasons why many people do view this as an allegory is because they feel so uncomfortable with the book. I mean, there is, a lot of erotic language and images. And God is not mentioned. And really no religious activity is mentioned. And it's never quoted in the New Testament. So some people say, this can't just be about romantic love. This has to be an allegory. But there's nothing in the book that says it's an allegory. And there's nothing in the rest of the Bible that says it's an allegory. And so personally, I don't view the Song of Songs as an allegory. I would say to you, this is not an allegory. This is a song about romantic love between a man and a woman. And that's why I'm sharing it today. Guys, you know what yesterday was, don't you? Valentine's Day. I hope you didn't forget that. That was yesterday, so I strategically placed it here. I told Obadiah, I'd love to have preached from you, Obadiah, today, but I had to choose Song of Songs over you because Valentine's Day was yesterday. Hey, I don't believe this is an allegory. If you do, that's okay. Maybe you're right and I'm wrong. But I don't view this as an allegory. I think the straightforward reading of the Song of Songs is this is a book about romantic love. The romantic love between a man and a woman. And you say, well, why is it in the canon then? Why is a love song in the canon? Well, it shows how important love is to God. It shows how important marriage is to God. God instituted marriage. Go back and look at it in Genesis chapter 2. God himself instituted marriage. God is pro-marriage. And God is pro-love within marriage. He doesn't want you just to exist together. There are a lot of couples, they don't get divorced, and they stay together, and they live under the same roof, but they don't have that chemistry, and they don't have that love that God wants you to have in your marriage. And if you've lost it, God can rekindle it. It honors God when you love each other. And this book just reminds me, God is not a cosmic killjoy. And I think a lot of people just think God is anti-pleasure. And if there's anything you like, anything you enjoy, God's going to take it away from you. Because God does not want you to ever have a good time. He's just against it altogether. And listen, that's not the God we serve. And right in the middle of the Bible is the Song of Songs, which is a book about pleasure, intense pleasure, but it's God glorifying pleasure because it takes place in the context of a man and a woman in holy matrimony. God is pro-marriage, and God is pro-love within marriage. He's not against sexual pleasure. He's not against sexual delight. God is not anti-sex. God is anti-sexual immorality. And so it's kind of like a fire. You enjoy a fire. I enjoy a fire. You know, maybe you have a fireplace at your home, and it helps you to keep warm during the winter season. And it just feels good to have a fireplace. We had a fireplace when I was growing up in Kentucky, down in the basement. We would go down there, man, it would just make that room so warm. And there's just something about the heat of a fireplace. Or maybe you enjoy camping and you'll build a campfire and put some rocks around it and have a safe place to have a campfire and tell stories around the campfire and look into it and reminisce and, you know, cook you some hot dogs and roast some marshmallows. We all enjoy a fire. But a fire is good only if it stays in the context for which it's made. If the fire gets out of the fireplace, it's going to burn down your home. If the fire gets out of the campfire area of the rocks, it's going to burn down your tent. And it can destroy many, many acres of land and livestock and other things. Because a fire should stay in its ordained place for good. And I want to tell you, sex is the same way. When sex is in that circle of holy matrimony, I want to tell you it's good. It's a blessing from the Lord. And it is to be enjoyed to the glory of God. Yes, I said that. It is to be enjoyed to the glory of God. But when it gets out, it's going to destroy. God is not anti-sex. God is anti-sexual immorality. Well, let's talk about the application. That's what we're going to talk about the most today. What can we learn from this book? What can we take away from this book? I think there are two things that really stuck out to me. I read this book over and over and over again. And as I was reading, two things stood out to me. The first one is physical intimacy with your spouse is celebrated in this book. Physical intimacy, it is celebrated, and you should celebrate it if you're married. There's no mention in this book of having sex simply to have children. It's never mentioned in this book. Hey, be sure and get together and have physical intimacy because you want to have children. Never mentioned. That's a good thing. Procreation is a good thing and a wonderful result of physical intimacy, but that's not the focus in this book. It's not participate in sexual intimacy in order to have children. The focus is not on procreation. The focus is on pleasure, the pleasure of sexual intimacy within marriage. Sexual pleasure is celebrated. Again, God is not anti-sex. He's anti-sexual immorality. Look at verse 4 of chapter 1 that I read. It says, "The king has brought me into his chambers." We all know what that means, right? And then if you look at chapter 6, verses 2 and 3, again, this is a graphic image. I don't have to go into it to explain it to you. But it says here, "My beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to graze in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's," the Shulamite speaking here, "and my beloved is mine. He grazes among the lilies." Let me just tell you this. He's not talking about she's not talking about an actual garden here. You know what she's talking about, and I know what she's talking about. Physical intimacy is celebrated. Let's look at a verse from the New Testament. Look over at 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 5. I think it's a good verse for a married couple. Again, it's easy to take one another for granted. It's easy to just exist under the same roof. And, you're there living in the same home, but you're not really together in a close way like God wants you to be. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 5, it says, "Do not deprive each other of sexual relations unless you both agree to refrain from sexual intimacy for a limited time." This isn't for that long of a time, but for a limited time, so that you can give yourselves more completely to prayer. There might be a time you say, hey, we're not going to be intimate for a few days or a few weeks. We're just going to be praying about a particular matter. But it says afterward, you should come together again, right? Come together again in intimacy so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Wives, you protect your husbands from the temptations that are out there by participating in an intimate way with him. And guys, you protect your wives in the same manner. And if you just say, hey, I'm refraining, I just don't want to do that anymore, I'm done with that, you might be setting up your spouse for temptation and maybe even stumbling in temptation. It says we have a responsibility. Now, I don't think you should do this just to fulfill your marital duty. I hope that you want to fulfill your marital duty, but that is a marital duty. Physical intimacy with your spouse is celebrated. Now, be careful about too much physical intimacy before you get married. Got to be careful here. You're dating someone. You're engaged. What's it say in Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 7? It says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Or as one translation says, until the appropriate time. What is this verse saying? I think it's saying that when you're dating someone, when you're courting someone, when you're engaged, when you know that's the person for me, and you want to kiss them, and you want to be with them, and you want to get close to them, be careful not to go too far. Be careful, because if you're not careful, you can fall into immorality. You say, but we're going to get married anyway. Hey, you're not supposed to participate in sexual intimacy until you are married. I know that's old-fashioned. Really, it's not old-fashioned. It's biblical. It's biblical. It's the campfire. It's the rocks to protect you, because when that fire gets out, it can be dangerous. It can be damaging. We moved up here in 2016. Graham was 2 and Savannah wasn't even 1 yet. And, at that age, at times we'd have people from the church come over and babysit our kids. And Bradley, Rich, and Rachel, they weren't married yet. And they came over a time or two and babysat the kids. And one of the reasons they came over, not only because they love our kids, but also it gave them time to be together. Because they had a rule that they would not be alone in the same house until they got married. They had that rule. Because they did not want to stumble, and they did not want to fall prey to sexual immorality. Now, I'm not telling you have to have that same rule, and they're not telling you everybody has to follow that same rule, but I commend them for that. I respect them for that they wanted to guard their love, they wanted to guard their relationship, and they wanted to say, we're not even going to be under the same roof alone until we're married, so that we're not even tempted. What does it say here? Don't stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Hey, we all know what it's talking about. In a moment when you are getting worked up and they're getting worked up, and you've said in your mind, hey, we're only going to go this far, we're not going to go any further, but in that moment, it's hard to turn it off. It's hard. So don't even get in that position to begin with, and you'll protect your relationship with one another, and you'll protect your relationship with God. So first of all, physical intimacy celebrated. God is not anti-pleasure. God is not anti-sex. He's simply anti-sexual immorality. Another thing, and that is praising your spouse is commended. You need to praise your spouse. We're going to read about that. Look over at Song of Songs chapter 4. Now, I just want to warn you, this is PG-13. Graham, you're only 12. But I'm going to let you slide here. Chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. Now, this is Solomon speaking, or the man. If you don't think it's Solomon, it's the man. But I'm assuming it's Solomon. And he's praising, notice, he's praising his spouse. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veil. And here he's probably saying that her eyes are beautiful, but maybe there's a sense of shyness about her. You know, a dove can be shy. Maybe he sees the shyness, and even shyness can be attractive. He says, your hair is like a flock of goats. Now, I don't recommend you guys saying this to your wife. I don't think she's going to get it. She might be upset about that, so don't take this literally. But in that day and time, or in that area of the country, the goats were black. And so by saying your hair is like a flock of goats leaping down the slopes of Gilead, he's probably saying your hair is black and healthy, is probably what he's saying to her. He says your teeth are like a flock of shorn ewes. Again, this is not something you're going to say to your spouse. Your teeth are like a flock of shorn ewes that have come up from the washing, all of which bear twins, and not one among them has lost its young. He's probably just saying your teeth are white, straight, and clean. That's the way I take it. Your lips are like a scarlet thread. They're red and desirable. And your mouth is lovely, probably saying your mouth is elegantly shaped. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. And here he's probably saying you have a healthy complexion. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built in rows of stone. On it hang 1,000 shields, all of them shields of warriors. Talking about her neck, probably saying your neck is graceful and dignified. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle that graze among the lilies. Again, probably saying your breasts are delicate and beautiful. Until the day breathes and the shadows flee, I will go away to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense. And isn't this beautiful here? It says, you are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. Isn't that wonderful? Now, let me tell you something. There is no woman that is this perfect. So when he says there is no flaw in you, he is seeing her through the eyes of love. And when you think of your spouse, you might think of this or you think of that. Let me tell you, when you see your spouse through the eyes of love, I hope you can say to them, there is no flaw in you. Well, let's go on over to chapter 5. Now, this is the woman praising the man. We're not just to praise our wives. Wives, you're to praise us too. So we want you to praise us a little bit. So we're going to read this passage. Chapter 5, beginning with verse 10. She says, my beloved is radiant and ruddy. Ruddy doesn't mean dirty. Ruddy means you have a good complexion. Distinguished among 10,000. His head is the finest gold. Again, a radiant complexion. His locks are wavy, black as a raven. He has black flowing hair. His eyes are like doves. He has beautiful eyes. beside streams of water, bathed in milk, sitting beside a full pool. His cheeks are like beds of spices, mounds of sweet-smelling herbs. Here his cheeks might actually be referring to his beard. Most men in that day had beards, and maybe just saying he has a well-groomed beard. His lips are lilies, dripping liquid myrrh, and that may speak of the enjoyment of kissing him. His arms are rods of gold set with jewels. His body is polished ivory bedecked with sapphires. His legs are alabaster columns set on bases of gold. Talking about his arms, talking about his body, talking about his legs, probably speaking of him in a way he is majestic, strong, noble. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet, probably talking of the words that he speaks to her, the loving, kind, affirming words he speaks to her, and maybe also, again, the kisses. His mouth is most sweet, and he is altogether desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend. I like that. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. You know, Jenny and I, before we became romantically involved and got married, it was on the foundation of a friendship. And it's very important in your marriage that you not only have romantic love for each other, but you have a friendship. You enjoy being together. You enjoy doing things together. You have things in common. And I hope the most important thing that you have in common is a relationship with Jesus Christ. Praising your spouse is commended. Now, what's the opposite of praising your spouse? Criticizing your spouse. And that's a no-no. Particularly when you do it in front of other people. Guys, if you put down your wife in front of her friends, you will wound her. And guys, or ladies, if you put down your husband in front of his guy friends, he's got some guys come over and they're hanging out or whatever, and you belittle him, you speak derogatorily toward him, you have wounded him. He may laugh it off and act like it's not a big deal, but I want to tell you, you've wounded him. Rather than criticizing our spouse, why don't we praise our spouse? Now, I know in the passages I read in chapter 4 and chapter 5, it was all physical praise. But it doesn't have to only be physical praise. You can praise them for their personality. You can praise them for their character. You can praise them for things that they've done to you. And I want to challenge you, each of you that are married. This week, I want you to write down 10 specific things that you love about your spouse, that you admire about your spouse. I want you to do that. Guys, I want you to do this for your wives. And ladies, I want you to do this for your husbands. I want you to get alone. I want you to write down 10 things. It can all be physical. None of it can be physical. It can be a mixture of both, but just 10 things that you love about them, that you appreciate about them. Doesn't have to be in any particular order. 10 things you love about them, 10 things you appreciate about them. Then I want you to give it to them. And you know what's going to happen? We're going to have revival break out in the church. Praise your spouse. So often it's easy to be critical. I'm just being honest. It's easy to be critical. When you live with someone day in and day out, you know, there's a right way to put the toilet paper in. There's a right way for it to flow. And you got it coming underneath and they got it over top. Boy, that's a big problem. No, it's not. But we can let little stuff like that bother us. And the next thing you know, we're seeing our spouse as an adversary rather than the partner God has given to us. Write down 10 things. Sometime this week, before next Sunday, write down 10 things that you love and appreciate about your spouse. Pray about it, write it down, give it to them, and let them know how much you love them and how much you care about them. Well, why is this book in the canon? Again, you might think it's an allegory, and that would solve all our problems, right? If it's an allegory and it's about God's love for Israel or Christ's love for the church, that would solve all of our problems. And we'd say, of course it's in the canon. There's nothing in this book that says it's an allegory. There's nothing in the rest of the Bible that says it's an allegory. So if you want to read it as an allegory, that's fine. And plus, in the rest of the Bible, it does say that God is the husband of Israel, and it does say that the church is the bride of Christ, but I don't read in other parts of the Bible such graphic language about that relationship, such erotic images about that relationship. So again, I view this as a book about romantic love between a man and a woman. God is not anti-sex. He is anti-sexual immorality. Can a person get saved on a message about the Song of Songs? Well, you can get saved under any preaching of the Word of God. And yes, we celebrate the pleasure that God has given us in marriage. And if you're not married and you're single, maybe God will bless you with a spouse someday. But even if He doesn't, our ultimate pleasure, all of these earthly pleasures point toward the ultimate pleasure. And I'm glad God created us to be able to enjoy pleasure. You know, God made pleasure. If you didn't get any pleasure from eating, you wouldn't eat, and you'd die. And if you didn't get any pleasure from having sex, nobody would have sex, and we'd all die. So God isn't against pleasure. He created it, but that pleasure points to an ultimate pleasure that only He can give you. Whether it's food or romance within marriage or whatever it is on this earth that we enjoy to the glory of God, none of it compares to the pleasure that we find in a relationship with Jesus Christ. He is our joy, and in Him is life, and life more abundantly.